On January 26, 1700, one of the biggest earthquakes in history hit off the coast of the United States. It had a magnitude of 9, which puts it in the top 10 most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. This earthquake triggered a huge tsunami and changed the coastline all the way from southern British Columbia down to northern California forever. Back then, the area wasn't very populated, but thanks to some clever research, scientists figured out exactly what happened that day by looking at old geological records, tree rings, and even some history from Japan. On the same day as the earthquake, a massive tsunami also hit Japan's eastern coast. For a long time, no one connected the two, but in the 1980s and 90s, researchers realized the tsunami in Japan had been caused by the earthquake in the Pacific Northwest. They were also able to pinpoint the exact day, January 26, 1700. They even found old trees in coastal Washington that had all perished around the winter of 1700, which matched up perfectly with the timing of the earthquake. The earthquake came from the Cascadia subduction zone, a fault where the Juan de Fuca plate slides under the North American plate. This fault stretches about 700 miles, from northern Vancouver Island in British Columbia to Cape Mendocino in California. The pressure from the moving plates builds up over time, and eventually, another big, devastating earthquake will hit the same region. It's just a matter of time. By looking at the geological records, past tsunami deposits, and signs of land level changes, scientists can figure out how often these huge earthquakes happen. Emergency planners have been preparing for the next big quake, often calling it the big one. Scientists believe earthquakes in the Cascadia subduction zone happen every 200 to 1,000 years. And since the last major one was over 300 years ago, the Pacific Northwest is definitely due for another. When it happens, the earthquake is expected to be as big as the one from 1700. But this time, it'll affect around 15 million people. The devastation will be severe. Buildings will collapse, roads and runways will crack, and bridges will fall. Communication in and out of the area will be cut off. But the worst part? The earthquake will trigger a massive tsunami that might hit parts of the Washington coast in as little as 10 minutes. It's not a matter of if, but when the Cascadia subduction zone will break. When it happens, it will be the worst disaster the US has ever faced. Worse than the Hurricane Katrina or Superstorm Sandy. It'll impact an enormous area, stretching from southern British Columbia all the way down through Oregon to northern California. That means millions and millions of people will be affected. Fairchild is considered a backup staging area for handling the aftermath of the earthquake, with Grant County International Airport in Moses Lake being the main one. For those who will survive the initial quake and tsunami, the aftermath could be just as disastrous. Aftershocks will follow, and transportation will be a mess. Roads will be damaged or completely blocked, airports will shut down, and most of the main routes, like Interstate 5, will have bridges destroyed. This means food and water supplies will be cut off, and it will be incredibly difficult for help to get in or for people to escape. Gas pipelines will most likely be damaged too, and restoring them could take anywhere from a few days inland to weeks or even months along the coast. Power outages will be widespread within 100 miles of the coast throughout the entire Pacific Northwest. And water could be out for 3 to 7 months. Even telecommunications will be down for 2 to 3 months across the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, and even parts of East Asia. The good news for eastern Washington is that it will mostly avoid the worst of it, thanks to natural barriers between the west and east sides of the state. The tsunami may hit the Columbia River Gorge, but it will lose energy quickly because of a sandbar under the river. The Cascade Mountains will absorb much of the earthquake's impact, so the east side won't feel it as strongly. And since eastern Washington won't get hit as hard, it'll be up to them to handle the aftermath of the quake. That means helping western Washington, taking in refugees from the areas that got destroyed, and delivering supplies to where they're needed. Scientists have looked at other major 8.0 to 9.0 magnitude earthquakes like the ones in Chile in 1960, Alaska in 1964, and Sumatra in 2004, and Japan in 2011. These kinds of quakes can shake the ground for anywhere between 6 to 10 minutes, and that's a long time for the ground to be shaking. Such quakes are super intense because they happen close to Earth's surface, so it's not just a quick shake. It's a long, strong one that can cause a lot of damage. If the Cascadia earthquake and tsunami were to hit tomorrow, over 13,800 people could lose their lives, and about 107,000 people could be injured. The economic toll in Washington, Oregon, and California could top 70 billion. To put that into perspective, we can compare these numbers with some other major earthquakes. In Chile's 1960 earthquake, about 1,650 people lost their lives. The 1964 Alaska quake resulted in around 140 lives lost. The 2004 Sumatra earthquake and tsunami took the lives of an estimated 280,000 people. And the 2011 Japan earthquake and tsunami caused over 20,000 casualties. Authorities know about the dangers of the Cascadia fault, but even with all the planning, no one can say for sure what will be needed when the big quake hits. Right after the earthquake and tsunami, the areas outside the immediate disaster zone won't be able to help much because roads and airports will be destroyed, and resources will be limited. How can we deal with this kind of disaster and its effects? We don't have all the answers yet. Right now, let's focus on the Cascadia subduction zone. It's a huge fault line that stretches about 620 miles from Vancouver Island to Cape Mendocino in California, sitting about 93 miles off the coast. It's like one tectonic plate is slowly sliding under another. When the plates are close to the surface, about 18 miles deep or less, they get stuck because of friction, kind of like pushing two rocks together. Over time, this creates a lot of pressure. When the pressure finally becomes too much, the plates slip, causing a massive earthquake. This is called a megathrust earthquake, and it can be huge. Below the area where the plates are stuck, there's a zone where the plates move really slowly. We're talking about just a few inches every few months. This slow movement helps to release some of the pressure, but it also builds up more pressure on the parts of the fault that are still stuck. This means that over time, it increases the chances of a huge earthquake happening. These massive quakes, called Great Subduction Zone earthquakes, can be stronger than magnitude 8.5. Megathrust earthquakes are the biggest earthquakes that happen. They can go over a magnitude of 9.0, which is insanely powerful. Just to put it in perspective, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake releases 1,000 times more energy than a 7.0 and a million times more energy than a 5.0. These earthquakes happen when a lot of pressure builds up in a part of the fault that's locked, which means the plate can't move past each other. When that pressure gets too high, the fault finally ruptures, releasing all that built-up energy in one massive shake. The Cascadia subduction zone is super long. That's why if it were to rupture all at once, it could produce a large earthquake. Scientists have studied this region and found that about 18 miles below the surface, the fault is completely locked. The plates there aren't sliding past each other. But deeper down, the plates start to slide more smoothly, causing less friction. This is important because it tells us how much stress is building up in that locked zone, and how it could eventually lead to a major earthquake.
Now, forget about the Kraken and monsters from the deep. I know, it's hard, but try. And you can forget about the Bermuda Triangle and other marine anomalies. They are nothing compared to rogue waves. Giant walls of water that suddenly appear and just as suddenly disappear on the sea surface. The destructive power of this phenomenon remained a mystery to humankind for a long time, but it appears that scientists have solved this secret. A rogue wave is a wave that exceeds at least twice all the surrounding waves. If you imagine the world ocean like a video game, then ordinary waves are your opponents. But the rogue one is a super boss. For centuries, hundreds and thousands of ships have gone missing during their voyages. People have made up a lot of legends about what was the cause of marine disasters. Sea monsters, underwater anomalies, mermaids? But today, scientists are increasingly inclined to believe that rogue waves are the main cause of unusual shipwrecks and missing ships. Some believe sailor stories about anomaly waves, while others didn't. But no one could prove their existence. However, everything changed in 1995. When a giant wall of water 85 feet high collapsed on an oil production platform off the coast of Norway. The waves around this monster were 39 feet high. In other words, the monster wave was about the size of a 9-story building, and the neighboring ones measured about 4 floors high. The oil platform wasn't destroyed, but the wave showed it could cause considerable damage to any buildings. Immediately after that, people began to study the phenomenon of rogue waves. However, in the beginning, instead of answers, scientists got even more questions. So, what's so mysterious about this phenomenon? We know how ordinary waves work. What's the problem with finding out the nature of rogue ones? Well, in fact, the difference between them is huge. Ordinary coastal waves are very predictable. They form because of the wind and the uneven landscape of the seabed. Depending on the depth, terrain, distance to the shore, and wind strength, the size and speed of the wave increase. These waves are safe. If they're not big, you can surf. If they are big, then you'll see them in advance and run out of the water, like me. Rogue ones, unfortunately, are almost unpredictable. They can appear suddenly, even during a calm sea. They appear not only on the coastline, but also in the open ocean, like a high-water cliff. The conditions for the appearance of these monsters are very chaotic. When several waves combine their energy into one, it creates a rogue wave. But this process cannot be predetermined or predicted. How is this energy formed? How is it released? And how much of this energy is needed? The questions are too complicated. Now, to try to figure it out, you can place a special buoy with sensors that scan wave data in the water. Then, you need to wait for the rogue wave to appear. And you don't know if it's going to happen or not. Fortunately, it happened off the coast of Vancouver Island. This monster, which was named the Ukulele wave, was 3 times the size of the surrounding waves and had a height of 58 feet. Proportionately, it was one of the most gigantic rogue waves ever recorded. And do you think that buoy with sensors helped to determine the nature of rogue waves? Of course not. It just showed the wave's data. In order to solve the mystery, a group of scientists from the University of Melbourne went to Antarctica, and this time they managed to find something. They brought the most modern equipment for studying weather conditions in water. They installed powerful stereo cameras on the icebreaker SA Augulus II and obtained 3-dimensional images of the ocean surface. Now, observation showed that the formation of rogue waves began when small waves were most susceptible to wind. That is, waves of varied sizes and directions meet the wind, which makes several small waves combine with one large one. It grows faster using this received energy. This is not just a combination of waves, but also their physical effect on one another. Scientists call this nonlinear effects. To get closer to the solution, the scientists also used the fourth-order Stokes theory, which speaks about more complex interactions of waves and their energy accumulation. The theory didn't help much, but it made the whole study more strange. Scientists realized that small waves fed off one another. Then some waves became bigger than the rest and took away all the energy. This process is called modulation instability, and it explains why rogue waves appear so suddenly, as if out of nowhere. Still, scientists admit that even this information isn't enough for them to fully explain these giant waves. Now, long story short, oops, too late, the wind pushes younger waves together, causing them to grow higher and increasing their speed. One wave steals the energy from the rest, and boom, a giant rogue wave appears, looking disproportionately huge compared to the others. It hits a boat, an oil rig, or the surface of the ocean and spills out all that energy. And that's it. Silence again. The existence of such a phenomenon has convinced scientists that rogue waves are the cause of many shipwrecks at sea. Now, seriously, think for yourself. When a ship gets into a storm, the captain reports it by radio and makes records in the logbook. But when a ship suddenly disappears from radar without any warnings about harsh weather, then it might have met a giant rogue wave. They're not tied to any particular location. They are sudden and unpredictable, and this makes them some of the greatest dangers in the ocean. So, what do we do now? How can ships, beaches, and oil production stations be protected? How to predict the appearance of a wave? Well, the answer is crest-trough correlation. It sounds incredibly difficult, but it's actually simple. The highest part of the wave is the crest. The lowest part of the wave is the trough. The idea is to measure how closely the ridges relate to the troughs. With strong correlation, waves form in dense groups. There are several regular waves and one or two large ones in the center. These conditions are ideal for the appearance of a rogue wave. Now, it seems obvious that scientists should use some instruments to measure the troughs and crests on the waves. It seems quite complicated, but in fact, these crest-to-trough correlations can be studied by watching the weather and currents. Scientists hope that they'll be able to predict the appearance of rogue waves using the same systems they need to predict the weather. So, you can take a breath. It seems we're safe. Or not. Given how the weather of our planet is changing, scientists expect an increase in wave height in the North Pacific Ocean. This will contribute to the appearance of giant rogue waves, even bigger than the ones people observed off the coast of Norway. How much bigger? 1.5 times? 2 and 3 times? Well, you better sit down. Scientists conducted experimental studies and found out that these waves can get 4 times larger than previously thought. Could the 85-foot-high wave recorded in 1995 be 4 times taller? It's hard to believe, but let's just imagine it theoretically. A rogue wave with a height of 340 feet may appear in the middle of a storm. This is more than the height of the Statue of Liberty from the pedestal to the tip of the torch. Such a giant wave can pull any ship underwater in a second and easily destroy an oil station. It can throw the Kraken or Megalodon out of the ocean like a stuffed toy. But how is it different from a tsunami? Well, a tsunami is born during seismic activity at the seabed. Such a wave grows, gains speed, and then crashes onto the shore. It's predictable, and you can spot it from afar. So let's hope that scientists will be able to predict the appearance of rogue waves in advance and warn ships not to sail into the risk zone. Ordinary people who live in coastal towns and relax on the beach are also at risk. In the future, they'll have to look not only at the weather forecast, but also at the risk of giant waves. Ocean waves can grow much bigger than we ever thought and be far more dangerous than we realized. People used to believe that waves only moved in 2 dimensions, just up and down, like when you draw them on paper. However, a recent study shows that waves are 3-dimensional structures, able to move in different directions. This finding indicates that the ocean is more complex than we imagined, and today's ships, wind farms, oil rigs, and other structures near the coast might not be ready for what is coming. First things first, waves break. It might seem obvious, but the truth is that we don't fully understand how and why that happens and don't know all the steps involved. What we do know is that when waves break, they change shape and become steeper. To better understand this process, researchers initially assumed that waves were 2-dimensional. This assumption was necessary because it made it easier to study waves, whether in theory or through computer simulations and experiments. But here's the thing. Saying that waves are 2-dimensional doesn't really capture what ocean waves are like. When most people think about waves, they imagine typical, non-threatening waves you see at the beach. But the ones we're talking about here happen in open water and form when waves coming from all different directions meet up. This wild meeting occurs under certain conditions at the ocean. like in a spot where two seas meet, or when winds suddenly change direction, like during a hurricane. When waves from two different directions come together, it creates this three-dimensional wave. To test how these unique waves behave and how they could make the ocean more dangerous for us, two researchers built a special tank, like a giant swimming pool, measuring 82 feet wide and 6.5 feet deep. All around this tank, they installed 168 mechanical paddles. These paddles act like giant hands, pushing the water back and forth to create waves, just like you would if you moved your hand through water in a bathtub. Stop the video and go do that right now. No, wait, I'm kidding. Anyways, the paddles can generate waves of varied sizes and shapes. Plus, they absorb incoming waves so that they don't bounce around the pool and mess up the tests. Beneath the tank, they put 28 huge fans that push water across the tank to simulate ocean currents, mimicking how ocean water moves. Altogether, they circulate around 2,400,000 liters of water in the tank. All of this was done to create a kind of mini-ocean, controlled by some really cool technology. Great! Everything was set, and it was time to test. The experiment has shown us that three-dimensional waves can become twice as steep as two-dimensional waves before breaking. Let me explain. So, the normal waves you see on the beach break when they reach a very steep angle. They have a limit, a maximum steepness, if you will. When that limit is crossed, the wave breaks. So, what this study is telling us is that waves in the open ocean can get as much as 80% steeper than this limit before they start breaking. That also means they can get almost twice as high as normal waves before they start to break. But the researchers found something else that was interesting. Normally, when a wave breaks, it creates a white cap, that foamy part you see on top, and once it breaks, it's done. There's no going back. It's lost its energy. But when these multi-dimensional waves break, there is no white cap. They can only keep growing. That happens because the wave's energy isn't just concentrated in one direction, allowing waves to continue growing even after reaching the steepness limit when they're supposed to break. It's like these three-dimensional waves can redistribute energy and continue building up in the middle of the ocean. That means that together, these waves can grow 4 times steeper and larger than what we previously thought was possible. So, we are talking about bigger, massive waves that can suddenly appear in the middle of the ocean. It sounds scary to say the least. That's why, for our own safety, it's important to understand how this phenomenon occurs. Maybe buildings and homes along the beach aren't at such high risk from this. But these giant waves can pose a bigger threat to things that are in the middle of the sea, like oil rigs, wind farms, and boats. This finding raises significant questions about whether these constructions, as we design them today, are safe and could handle such extreme wave patterns. The thing is, sailors have been trying to warn us about this for centuries. In the 19th century, a French explorer named Jules Dumont d'Urville, I gave it a shot. He reported seeing rogue waves over 100 feet high during his voyages. Even though he was very experienced and respected, plus 3 other people confirmed that it had indeed happened, his story was discredited. Like this account, all other stories about massive and wild waves in the middle of the ocean were dismissed as myths, just tales sailors told to make their adventures sound more exciting. Hey, don't we all? Scientists only started taking these reports seriously in 1995, when a rogue wave was finally measured for the first time. The terrifying event happened at a gas platform in the North Sea, about 100 miles off the coast of Norway. The structure was built to withstand a wave of 64 feet, and even then, they thought a wave that big would only happen once every 10,000 years. But they definitely weren't ready for what happened on New Year's Day, when a monstrous 85-foot wave, 21 feet taller than predicted, hit the platform. In a more recent case from 2018, 8 men were on a 61-foot fishing vessel over 400 miles northeast of Hawaii's Big Island when they suddenly got hit by a pair of rogue waves. One hit the back of the boat, and the other slammed into the side. It was too much to handle. A lot of water came over the top, flooding the boat and pulling it down to the depths. The crew had to abandon the ship and get into a lifeboat immediately. Thankfully, they were all rescued with no injuries at all. These are just a few examples showing that our current oil platforms and ships might not be prepared for massive rogue waves. That's why experts suggest that one solution could be for ship designers to make ships strong enough to withstand double the significant wave height. However, they'd probably need some convincing because of the increased costs. So, here is a pretty convincing fact. It's believed that between 2011 and 2018, 210 waves of this type were recorded around the world, but it's very likely that the real number is much higher. What triggers rogue waves is still somewhat of a mystery, but we know they are not caused by movement on the seabed. Instead, they seem to be more related to bad weather. In Tampa Bay, for example, most rogue waves come in from the west, especially when it's stormy or windy. But we can't say this is the main cause everywhere in the world, as experts believe there could be several other factors at play. What is really concerning is that rogue waves can strike without warning. The open sea can be completely calm when suddenly the whole scene turns into a fight for survival. So, can we actually predict this phenomenon? It looks like we can. In a very recent study, researchers created a computer system that uses measurements from buoys to predict unusually large waves 5 minutes before they happen. It can catch about 3 out of 4 rogue waves. While the system does have some false alarms, the researchers say that from a safety standpoint, knowing a rogue wave might happen is better than not knowing. And I think we can all agree on that. It's 9:59 a.m. when a man is jolted awake in his bed by a powerful, mysterious force. While he's trying to figure out what's going on, a giant 100-foot-tall column of water is already surging toward his hometown. In 20 minutes, most of his friends and family members will lose their lives when a sky-high wall of water sweeps away buildings, trees, and cars. And it can happen to you at any given time. It's the day after Christmas in 2004. Thousands of tourists from Europe and America are enjoying tropical beaches in Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia when a powerful undersea earthquake strikes off the western coast of northern Sumatra, Indonesia. It's a 9.3 magnitude earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Asia. It triggers one of the largest tsunamis in history, the Boxing Day tsunami, which will take the lives of 230,000 people within a few hours. The city of Banda Aceh in Sumatra, Indonesia, home to 260,000 people, is the closest to the earthquake's epicenter. In less than half an hour after the quake, huge 10-story tall waves crash into the city. More than 60,000 people lose their lives immediately. The destruction is so severe that almost no one in its path survives. Next, the tsunami hits Thailand. The waves, rushing at a mind-boggling 500 miles per hour across the Indian Ocean, reach the shores of Phang Nang and Phuket about 90 minutes later. Despite such a significant time gap, both locals and tourists are caught totally off guard. Many beachgoers even walk out onto the beach, curious about the strangely receding sea, only to be overtaken by a towering wall of water. Nearly 5,400 people, including 2,000 foreign tourists, won't survive that day in Thailand. An hour after Thailand, the tsunami hits southeastern India near Chennai. Debris-filled waves push miles inland, taking the lives of more than 10,000 people. Sri Lanka faces even worse devastation. The island will lose over 30,000 people, and hundreds of thousands will become homeless. The tsunami's incredible strength is evident even far away. 8 hours later, it claims its last victims in South Africa, 5,000 miles from the quake's epicenter. There, rogue waves catch swimmers off guard. Researchers from NOAA's Center for Tsunami Research explain that the destruction was due to the sheer power of the earthquake. It originated from a megathrust fault. That's where heavy ocean plates dive beneath lighter continental plates. These faults are the largest in the world and lie underwater. The 2004 earthquake ruptured a 900-mile stretch of the Indian and Australian plates, 31 miles beneath the seafloor. Plus, instead of one quick jolt, the quake lasted for 10 minutes and released an unimaginable amount of energy. During the shaking, massive sections of the seafloor moved upwards by 130 feet. That's a lot. Such a sudden movement set colossal waves rippling across the ocean. Imagine it like dropping a massive pebble into the water. The thing is, tsunami waves aren't like those surfing waves you may imagine. No, they look like a fast-moving whitewater river that floods everything in its way. If you get caught in those raging waters, it's almost impossible to survive. If the powerful currents don't pull you under, floating debris will. That's the reason why, during earthquakes, there are usually many injuries and fewer lives lost. With tsunamis, it's the opposite. There's way fewer injuries than fatalities because it's too hard to survive. Catastrophic tsunamis like the one in 2004 are rare. That's why India and Sri Lanka had no record of such disasters. This lack of experience, combined with the absence of warning systems, made the consequences of the disaster even more tragic. People didn't feel the earthquake because they were far from the epicenter. And with no natural warning signs, no official alerts, and no history of tsunamis, the waves that hit crowded coastlines had devastating effects. By the way, the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean on Earth, is where most earthquakes and tsunamis occur. Locally damaging tsunamis strike somewhere in this ocean about once every 1 to 2 years. 76% of the recorded fatal tsunamis happened in the Pacific, and 99% of tsunami casualties are caused by local or regional tsunamis, which occur more often and hit quickly. But then a question arises: could a tsunami as devastating as the Boxing Day one happen again? Unfortunately, the answer isn't very straightforward. A warning system has indeed been established in the Indian Ocean. Its goal is to alert coastal nations of potential tsunamis. But human behavior is still a critical challenge. This became clear during a real-life test in 2012. That's when many residents of Banda Aceh, Indonesia, simply ignored evacuation towers after a tsunami warning. People never seem to learn, huh? The Indian Ocean Warning Network uses undersea pressure sensors placed near tectonic plate fault lines. These sensors detect any changes and transmit data to surface buoys, which then send it via satellite to control centers on land. Authorities analyze the information and decide whether to issue warnings and evacuate at-risk areas. Aceh, located on one of the world's most active fault lines, implemented additional safeguards. They installed sirens in coastal cities, and people get alerts on their cell phones. Plus, there are evacuation towers, reinforced concrete structures capable of holding 500 people. They are special safe zones. Authorities did test how well prepared people were. In 2009, 18 Indian Ocean countries participated in an evacuation drill, simulating a large earthquake. Thousands of coastal communities took part in this drill, and officials concluded that the exercise had been a success. Fast forward to the system's first real test in April 2012. An 8.6 magnitude undersea earthquake west of Aceh triggered tsunami warnings. And even though there were no significant waves, the whole situation revealed critical flaws. Many residents ignored evacuation towers, choosing instead to flee by car or motorbike. This led to citywide traffic jams, with people getting stranded in areas vulnerable to a potential tsunami. It was chaos. Some residents even went back to the beach to look for the signs of a tsunami, which is a life-threatening mistake. So apparently, there is still a lot of work to do when it comes to tsunami survival. But what you need to know by heart is the signs of an impending tsunami. First of all, it's severe ground shaking. Strong earthquakes near coastal areas can generate tsunamis. If you notice that water on the beach starts to recede at an alarming rate, exposing the ocean floor, reefs, and stranded fish, run. Then there might be unusual ocean sounds. Keep in mind that a loud roaring noise, resembling a train or jet engine, may accompany an approaching tsunami. If you notice any of these warning signs, Do not wait for official evacuation orders. Leave low-lying coastal areas immediately and move to higher ground as fast as possible. If you're at home, make sure your family members know about the tsunami and follow official guidance. You should remember that locally generated tsunamis may strike within minutes. You have to act quickly. If it's a distant tsunami, you may have more time to evacuate. If you don't have an opportunity to move inland, hide in high reinforced concrete buildings. Avoid staying in small buildings or homes in low-lying areas. If you're on a boat, stay offshore. Tsunami activity isn't as dangerous in deep water, so avoid returning to port during a tsunami warning. If you're already in port, check with harbor authorities for guidance. If it's possible to move to deep water, do it in an orderly manner. It may be safer for small boat owners to leave their vessel and move to higher ground. And always, prioritize moving to higher ground over saving your belongings. If you live in a coastal area, you can take some measures to protect your property in advance. Since most tsunami waves are under 10 feet, you may consider elevating your house. It can reduce damage. You can also consult an engineer to assess and reinforce your home. And finally, don't forget to protect outbuildings too, and create fences that will allow animals to reach higher ground.